Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Here to do albums of the year 1979. A few things to say about that. One thing just to announce, I'm not sure how often I'm going to be doing both the virtual, like, Spotify, React to Spotify stuff, and just because the quality is just... I don't like it. I don't like how great the quality is in it. I also may not be doing streams anymore on camera. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's until I get a new laptop or get something fixed or a new camera. I might just, or a microphone. Camera's not so much the issue, it's the microphone, I think, but my apologies for that, but I'm not sure. I guess I'll have to see, but I'm sort of hesitant to do those kind of videos and hesitant to be using my laptop here because of the problems with the microphone especially, and the picture even to an extent, from anyway. But, so 1979, so I'm making this obviously on a camcorder so it comes out better. I mean, I could try my phone too, but 1979, historically, I kind of think of as like one of the weakest years. Like in the 1970s, I think it's always been my least favorite year. And it like has always lacked like a favorite record or a record I look and revere. Even like 1970, I would say, well, as the 70s went on, it seems like got better and better. I mean, 1970 was the year Adam Hart Mother came out, and Trespass, and Third, and, yeah, I mean, those to me, there's some classic records in there, like go-to records from those artists. And 79, at this point, you discover more music, things can change, but it's always been like the year with albums from artists that was like their third, fourth, fifth best. It was like a follow from a great record or a better record, which is good, but it's sort of like mid-level year. And I think when we get into the 80s, some of that goes down more, but some of it doesn't. And the other thing about the 80s, of course, you get other artists that come in that are new, that sort of supplant or fill that sort of void for upper echelon records, to me. That all being said, having done a little more digging and, still doing research and digging with some of these artists, there's more good records in 1979 than I realized. I can't remember who it was. It was either Pain of Salvation, Ben Sinister, or Smashing Pumpkins, or maybe all three. Like a song titled 1979, or Pain of Salvation references 79, I think. But I think Ben Sinister on their last EP did. I can't remember. And there's something to do with Smashing Pumpkins. But anyway, a lot of people love 79, sort of the cross between the like post-punk and new wave, the incoming of that. Prog rock was kind of, jazz fusion was kind of dying. But those people really championed that of it being something new, and punk was big, and and it was. But that's kind of why I often have not found as much and looked down on 79. So anyway, I'm gonna get into it. I'm enough babbling about the summary. So a couple of records that aren't on my list that might find their way into my list. There's a lot of records on this list that are newly on the list that are sort of moving around, and I'm just hearing literally a couple times. Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, which is like a double record. It's a long record, and I know the title track, but I wasn't really feeling it after listening to about half of it a couple days ago. Frank Zappa's Shake Your Booty. Still in the process of checking that Zappa playlist out, but I guess the songs on our playlist from the prog stream are more of the comedic ones, which is definitely uncertain, but I haven't listened to it. And then Gang of Four's Entertainment, which is like, I think their debut album, and also they're considered their masterpiece. So anyway, going up the list, Cornerstone from Styx, 22, it has Babe. It definitely is a big step down from Pieces of Eight and Grand Illusion, but, I mean, they would do Paradise Theater and do Kilroy. It definitely was a product of that era, the soft rock. They were doing less prog, less classic, more soft rock. Anyway, Jethro Tull's Stormwatch, another album. I like the title track. I'm not that crazy about, and the truth is with Jethro Tull, really basically from Heavy Horses on, Crest of an Ave is decent. That's about it. I haven't listened to a lot of their records since that period of time, but mostly because when I've heard some of them, it's just Jethro Tull's basically a feast or famine band for me. When they're good, they're really good, but when they're not that good, I don't need to bother with them generally. But I love them when they're really great, though. So number 20, an album that I would have figured would have been a little higher, but Van Halen's Van Halen 2 really is not in comparison for the debut album. And they have some covers on here. You're No Good, Dance the Night Away. Dance the Night Away is a great rendition. I love that. That's their version. I think their version. Spanish Fly, Women in Love, Beautiful Girls is a ballad. It's just, it's sort of... I mean, I'm not a massive Van Halen fan, even though I had one summer I bought all their albums, but with Van Halen 1, they were really raw and they were up in your face. There's a bigger drop from this album to the debut album than you compare like the Boston second album, Don't Look Back. But anyway, it's not terrible, but it didn't go that high for me. Number 20. Number 19, Steve Hackett's Spectral Mornings. While I don't like it as much, I'm really more of like about his debut album, and then I just kind of check tracks. I like the song Every Day a lot, the title track, but I've never gotten obsessed with some of his records, even, Please Don't Touch 2 or whatever. Number 18, Kansas's Monolith. I don't have a physical copy of that, and I did listen to that the other day, and the thing about that album is it has some good songs on it. However, it's like retreading a lot of, like, Kansas, it's like half of it is like they weren't sure what they wanted to be at that point. I think it is the last album with Kerry Livgren. I could be wrong on that, but I'm kind of thinking it was. Because I know basically in the sort of lore of Kansas, the next album may have been like Audio Visions, and that was the one that a lot of people jumped ship on them. They were sounding more like an AOR band and not like a progressive rock band. But listening to it, it just seems like a lot of it is just they're remaking a lot of songs. It's a little of the AC/DC problem. But, I mean, some of the songs are still good. It's just, I feel like if I'm listening to this, well, why don't I listen to Left Overture or Song for America or something like that? I mean, the first People of the South Wind is good, and Angels Have Fallen. That's maybe the proggiest track on the record. A Glimpse of Home, How My Soul Cries Out for You. They're good tracks. It's kind of Kansas by the numbers. That's kind of the biggest, other than the fact they were kind of leaning more toward the AOR, which they would do in the 80s, and I know that Steve Morse joined them and everything, but so that's why it didn't finish nearly as high. And even though I know, again, like even the purists from Kansas look at Monolith as still among their, very much of this era. Look at Jethro Tull's Heavy Horses versus Stormwatch. Excuse me. So number 18. Number 17, XTC's Drums and Wires. I haven't listened to this in a long time, and I did revisit it today. It has, of course, Making Plans for Nigel, which is a great track. It's one of the 10 best XTC tracks for me. But it's just, it's not as polished. Obviously, the debut album, and then there was like one that followed it the same year in 78. And White Music. And then this did not have Dave Gregory, I don't believe. It's got its charm. Some of it you could see where they were going. But the sort of art rock prog fan in me, and sort of some of Andy Partridge's vocal style, when he's just experimenting, he was definitely channeling punk and also trying to yell. There's one song on here which I didn't heart because it's called Complicated Game. That is one of the most out there songs, especially for the time you think about 1979. If it was done in the 90s or the last 20 years, yeah, it still is kind of out there, but for then, he was just going at it. It was almost like proto Mike Patton in some ways. He was screaming, but not screaming. It was just, it was like beating a dead horse in some ways. But, some of these tracks, That Is the Way, I like a lot, Day in and Day Out. but it's more raw, and that's why it's not as replayable for me. I know that the XTC, huge XTC fans really, praise Drums and Wires, but. So, number 16, Prince. I don't have a copy of this, although I wanted to show, I forgot, this is the debut album from '78, should have been on my list. It's got I'm Yours, which is just unbelievably awesome, the guitar riff. Doesn't sound like normal Prince, but this is the second album, the self-titled album from Prince, which I've only, I maybe listened to one or two times before I did Yesterday. And, I mean, it is, a lot of it's falsetto, which a lot of the early Prince did, just purely falsetto vocals, which kind of, it loses its charm after a little while, but I will say it has, of course, I feel the original Feel For You, which, of course, Shaka Khan made massive for that hit a couple years later. And it also has I Want to Be Your Lover, which was a bit of a hit. But it has the song Bambi. Oh my god, I love I'm Yours from the first album, from For You. Bambi's like the sequel, and this is in a good way. It's Prince showing his chops. When he's going at it, oh my god, the guy, especially his early days, he had a lot to prove. His reputation as a maestro and this unbelievably technical guitarist was completely spot on. I mean, when he's really on with his guitar work, he's amazing. He's unbelievable. And, I mean, it doesn't happen every song. I like other songs on it, but that Bambi track, yeah, it's right up there. I mean, if I'm Yours is my second favorite Prince song, Bambi might be my third or fourth. Sexy Dancer, yeah, Why Do You Want to Treat Me So Bad? Yeah, I mean, it's a decent record, but, man, it's like he's more about his individual tracks. You gotta find the little deep tracks for Prince, and then you're finding gold. So anyway, number 16, number 15, this is a little low for a lot of people, and, I bought the CD when I was in high school, The Clash's London Calling, double album, which features 3 tracks I think of it for. The title track, of course, Train in Vain, and Lost in the Supermarket. The Clash compared to, say, the Sex Pistols or, like, a lot of the punk from the 70s, they're better. But I don't find them... I find their reputation is a little better than it deserves. I mean, overrated is the way to just say it, but... It's fine. It's not an awful record, but at the same time, it's not a record I would want to listen to an hour and 7 minutes or whatever of an hour 5 minutes. Some of these other tracks, like Bomb Track was another one that I remember. Clamp Down. So I mean, it has some other decent tracks, but it's less punk and more. There's a lot of reggae influences anyway. Number 15. Number 15. Number 14. All right. Renaissance, talk about Kansas and Jethro Tull, and got this massively cracked jewel case here. Renaissance's album Azure d'Or, which has to do with means blue light or something like that. This has a couple other bigger pop songs, and you could say the later 70s Renaissance, they were trying to write pop songs. Jekyll and Hyde and The Winter Tree. I mean, both of them are great tracks. The rest of it is sort of hit and miss. I mean, there's not too much orchestration, but I mean, it would be higher. I mean, you compare this to Song for All Seasons, and it's a pretty reasonable step down, unfortunately, but I still think it's a decent record. It's just not one I've listened to nearly as much. I like Golden Key, Kalinda, The Magical Isle, Flood at the Lions. There's still a lot of moments to enjoy. A lot of Annie Haslam's, very, polished vocal work on this. But there's not as much orchestration. They were using more synths. So, but it's actually the classic lineup, too, which I guess I was reading that Terrence Sullivan and John Tout both left the band after that. John Tout, I guess he was dealing with the loss of, a family member, his brother or something. And so him and Terrence were, friends. So this is the last album with the classic lineup. It's kind of too bad in some ways that they had that just fantastic run of records with that lineup. It's 5 or 6 records from Prologue all the way up to Song for All Seasons or this. But, at least they didn't hang on and keep milking it, keep trying to, do more, try to adapt and do punk or do new wave music when it really wasn't their forte. They did, but not with that lineup. All right, so moving on, number 13, Split Enz. I just checked this out today, the album Frenzy. And Split Enz, I'll confess, I'm completely new to. Like one or two members ended up in Crowded House. One of the Neil Finn, whatever, the Finn brothers. So I can't really like name check a lot of songs. There's a song called like I See the Red or whatever. There's a couple different versions, I guess, of it, and it's not on Spotify, which is interesting. But it's on YouTube, so I was listening to it on YouTube. It's an album that's hard to find, though. But they're kind of like... I mean, there's good things about Split Enz that I'm noticing, and there's things that maybe aren't quite as good. What's it called again? Frenzy. Their next album was like their commercial like peak or whatever. Yeah, because like there's different versions of it. It's called I See Red. So there's different versions of it. And that's it's like the Beatles or Pink Floyd. Let's just see here. 1 second. I mean, I was just like looking at the track list. I'm like, okay, yeah, that song's good. That song's good. The first half of it I think is better than the second half, but it's called like I See Red or Red. That's very like repetitive though. But Give It a Whirl, Master Plan, Hermit McDermott. That was a great track. They used some vintage synths. It's almost like a Moog of some kind. My criticism of Split Enz, just hearing this record just once, is that their vocal style is kind of generic in some ways. It's not as distinguishable. They do remind me of 10cc, though the singers in 10cc are, from my impression, a little bit better. Now, you could say like Crowded House or whatever. Maybe they got better vocally, but there's a lot of different kinds of songs, though, and that's the criticism and the charm of this record, that they go back, they shift styles and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a work in progress for me with them, and the next record, which was their, like, True Colors or whatever it's called, they had an album called Dysrhythmia, which there was a technical post-metal band that was kind of active about 10 or 15 years ago called Dysrhythmia. I don't know if there was any connection, but, yeah, I mean, they're from Australia or New Zealand, I think New Zealand, but Split Enz, Frenzy, could go higher depending on if I get more attached to them, but number 12, Christopher Cross's self-titled album, which features two big hits. One being Sailing, of course, the ballad, and then the other being Ride Like the Wind, which has Michael McDonald. But, I mean, it was soft rock. It was his biggest album, and, it was interesting about Christopher Cross. And this album has Eric Johnson. He's from Texas. But it has Eric Johnson, it has a lot of, like, who's who people, besides Michael McDonald. I mean, it's not amazing. Never Be the Same was one of the other tracks. I think it's like Say You'll Be Mine, or I really don't know anymore. One of those also has Michael McDonald, but it's very well produced. It's his peak. He did the Arthur theme after that, of course, but you want to go like yacht rock, soft rock, sort of vintage, one of the essential records. This is obviously it. And, just for those two songs alone, or three songs, it's worth, the price of admission. And, what really good production. Love the arrangements. That song, that Ride Like the Wind, I can't get out of my head when I hear it. Of course, they did the parody with Rick Moranis on SCTV, where he was impersonating Michael McDonald, going in and out of the studio in the vocal booth. So, number 11, an album that I haven't listened to that much, but I do own, the debut album from Joe Jackson, so Christopher Cross and Joe Jackson. This is the one I have on 10-inch. I got a good deal on this. And this is a fun record. It has the biggest hit on it is She Really Going Out With Him, which does sound a fair amount like Elvis Costello. There's about 4 tracks, though, in the middle here. Whenever he uses piano, Joe Jackson, he can make magic. Some of it is reggae-ish, some of it is kind of punkish, and some of it is power pop-ish, to varying degrees of success. But, I mean, I think he might have done better work later. Of course, Stepping Out was a couple albums later, but the title track, Fools in Love, Do the Instant Mash, and Pretty Girls. That run of 4 tracks are great. Don't Ask Me, also the single. Joe Jackson is another artist who I only know to small degrees, but I probably need to get better, more familiar with. But that's why even this album's coming at number 11. So number 10, if I have it on here, Talking Heads' "Fear of Music," another band that I'm sort of taking in, and I talked about more songs about buildings and food on the 78 list. I'm not sure I like this album more, but I don't know if it's worse. I mean, I guess this is their peak, Talking Heads, and David Byrne has an unusual vocal style, but I'm not bothered by that much. And I guess part of the charm in discovering Talking Heads music a little more here, just through this process, through this exercise, is that I hear bands I love, the influence. I hear similarities to XTC also, of course. I think Talking Heads at this point was maybe one or two steps further down the road in terms of their songwriting prowess compared to XTC. But the same kind of element of using quirkiness, rhythms, and clever little twists, and great energy happens in this. But this is like basically Buildings and Food. I don't know about 77, I didn't listen to that. Buildings and Food, and then this, and then of course Fear of Music, and then of course Remain in Light, which that's the one with Adrian Belew. But I, Zimbra, Mind, Life During Wartime, that's the most well-known song on here. Paper, Cities. There's the first half of this album, man, there's just this wonderful energy. The second half gets a little weirder, and there's some ballads, like Air. Animals is unusual. I liked electric guitar. The song Drugs I'm not crazy about. So I think it's kind of uneven, but having like very vague experience with Talking Heads, I think I kind of have slept on them and starting to, just like 10cc, have motivation after hearing this album at number 10 to hear more of their music, especially. And maybe David Byrne's solo music, and Adrian Belew plays on that too. So anyway, number 9, the soundtrack to Quadrophenia, which, of course, I love Quadrophenia. If it was just Quadrophenia another year, this would be in the top 3. This would probably be album of the year, actually. But I can't go ahead and just say, well, because it's got songs from Quadrophenia, it's album of the year, because that's from 74, was it, or 73. It does have 3 extra tracks that weren't on the original Quadrophenia album. Of course, Keith Moon had passed away. The 3 tracks are okay. They're not amazing, but it has some other songs. It has like James Brown's Night Train, Louie Louie by the Kingsmen, He's So Fine by the Chiffons, and Be My Baby, Ronnie Spector. So, I put it at number 9 just because it's a great film. It's much better than Tommy. So, but yeah, I mean, it would go higher if I was just... And some of the songs are... Like, there's one song that has a different bass line, and it's not the full album, so there's a lot of reasons to sort of say, well, it's like an abridged version of Quadrophenia and then adapted slightly. A little bit like what the Deer Hunter did with Migrant, but I think the Migrants actually turned out better than the original. The problem is, how can you make such an amazing album better? You really can't very easily. So number 8, all the way up to 8, Michael Nesmith, Infinite Rider on the Big Dogma. This has some really great tracks, and it has probably my second favorite Michael Nesmith song after Wax Minute, the track Capsule. It's so dreamy and spacey. I think about traveling time. It talks about people from 100 years from now, and it's surreal. And the fact he's gone, I mean, I knew it before he was gone, has almost more meaning. I wonder where maybe Michael Nesmith is still out there, and now this is coming. I thought about like 100 years ago, but beyond that, it has a number of other really good songs on it, including Cruising, which was a song that he ended up doing a video that ended up on MTV in the early days. It's not very country rock, though. It's more a lot of piano arrangements, some bluesy rock. I mean, it's progressive in some ways. I don't know. I mean, Carioca, which is weird. Carioca. Carioca. This, it's interesting the way the track list is written on here. This is almost like an abridged version, because the version that it's not on Spotify but on YouTube has more tracks than this. Horse Race, I mean, it's Nesmith doing kind of adapting in some ways to the new wave, sort of maybe new wave and I don't know, I wouldn't call it punk, but it sounds very much a departure from the first National band and even Tantamount of Treason. They're really Red Rhodes isn't on here. There aren't any of his main guys on it. It's a whole new cast of people that really, looking at the credits, didn't really go on to do a lot that I know of. David McKay, I think he might have played with him later, but my wife, of course, would probably call me on the carpet on that and say, "No, you don't know this. You don't know this," and of course, these people played with him. They played with these other people, but anyway. Great record. Unfortunately, again, it's not on Spotify at this point. Infinite Rider on the Big Dog went number 8. Number 7, the follow-up to the next Bruford record, which still does include Alan Holdsworth, which I'm with my friend John with him, unfortunately. R.I.P. Alan Holdsworth. He was a very talented guitarist, but he tends to noodle too much for me on a lot of stuff I listen to. This album is called One of a Kind from Bruford. I like a lot of it still, and so it has to go this high, but Hell's Bells especially, that's the sort of the showstopper on here, plus the Sahara of Snow Suite Part 1 and 2. 5G, there's a couple other decent tracks. I mean, I think this is better. Him and Alan Holdsworth left UK for the better in some ways, but, and again, I think this is better than Feels Good to Me, but I don't know. I mean, I may be overrating it, because I had this originally on my list even higher, but, because I bought it years ago. I was getting really into Bruford. Dave Stewart? Dave Stewart is probably the best moments on that record. He's featured. So, that's number 7. Number 6, people say it's sacrilege, it's this low. The one and only, face of Pink Floyd, besides Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall. I've said my piece probably ad nauseum or, several times. I like about a third of it. A third of it is sort of okay, and a third of it is way too conceptual and over the top. It's beating a dead horse, so it's just bloated and long, and it's a concept like the whole story of, Pink, the rock star. Not crazy about it. I mean, Hey You's a great track. There's some great tracks on here, but it's just so long, it gets dropped down. And on another year, like you put this in 77 or 78 or 80, it almost came out in 98 because it came out like in it was like December or November of 79. This would have been, I don't know if it would have made the top 20, maybe the top 30, but as much as I love Pink Floyd, there's a lot of music on here I do enjoy, and I'll say the Final Cut and this are not that different in some ways in terms of ranking, because while the Final Cut on paper isn't as good, it's not nearly as long, and it's similar in a lot of ways. But I mean, I like In the Flesh, I like The Thin Ice, I love Goodbye Blue Sky. It's one of the best, dreamy Pink Floyd songs ever. It's an escapist song. Mother's great, but there's so many songs that radio have played, like Run Like Hell. I don't hate. Young Lust, it's okay. I used to get sick of it. I don't hate it as much now. And of course, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 I'm kind of sick of. But, some of the other parts of the trial, and it's just, I don't need to hear it, Roger, I know it's everyone's favorite statement concept album. It pales greatly to The Lamb Lies Down Broadway, especially Quadrophenia. It's a double concept album from the 70s. But anyway, it goes number 6 as I love Pink Floyd, and it still has enough music I enjoy. I mean, again, at some point, I might put like Talking Heads ahead of it if I get more into that record. So, number 6, Toto's Hydra, which features the song 99 and a few others, the 7.5 minute track, the title track, a few others like Mama, White Sister, Lorraine. They have a lot of ballads with like name after female names. Rosanna, was it Pamela? But yeah, this is a great record. Although one that I haven't really listened to that much. 99 was like the hit off of it. The semi hit. It was not as big as obviously some of the others. So, but just to know that I had the numbers wrong. The Wall should have been number 7. Everything's dropped 1 because I didn't have Toto on the list, and then on to number 5. But yeah. Statement concept album. It pales greatly to The Lamb Lies Down Broadway, especially Quadrophenia. It's a double concept album from the 70s. But anyway, it goes number 6 as I love Pink Floyd, and it still has enough music I enjoy. I mean, again, I would, at some point, I might put, like, Talking Heads ahead of it if I get more into that record. So number 5, it's not The Wall, it's Off the Wall from Michael Jackson. Not his debut album, it was like his 3rd album, actually. He did Band, he did one other record, it was self-titled. But really, it's sort of like a statement. Like, first album he worked with Quincy Jones. The cast of characters on this thing is off the charts. The drummer, John Robinson, played with anyone and everyone. This guy, R&B and funk and soul music in the late 70s and early 80s. Drum work is wonderful. I mean, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Rock With You, of course, are the biggest hits, and the title track. Girlfriend is a song that McCartney wrote for Michael Jackson, but he wanted him to like sing on it on the Wings record that came out in '78, I guess. And I think Michael's version's better. I like Michael's version. I mean, it does have, that sheen. It definitely sounds 70s-ish. Whereas Thriller, we get to that when we get to 1982, sounds super 80s-ish because it's like the defining record of the 1980s. Off the Wall is like a total 70s, like a late 70s. I mean, you can hear like an influence from the Bee Gees, and but it's a fun record. It doesn't have too many tracks I would skip. It's got a couple ballads. She's Out of My Life. Burn This Disco Out. I mean, the vocal performance. He's doing his sort of peak of his falsettos. I mean, he did obviously a lot of that with the records in the 80s. But, he was a little younger then, so he was just going for it. And Quincy Jones is trying to get whatever he could out of him. I think Larry Carlton's on this. Of course, there's a couple others. Oh, there's only one member of Toto on this, though. It's Steve Porcaro, not Jeff. But anyway, Off the Wall by Michael Jackson, number 5. Number 4, for a year that I'm not that great. I'm talking a lot about it. The Police's Regatta de Blanc. They were a band that progressed in each album. They seem to get better in some ways. I haven't listened to this album in probably 15 years. This is a lot of, besides the songs that are on the radio, like Message in a Bottle, which is great, Walking on the Moon, but The Bed's Too Big Without You is a classic. I love that. The reggae feel and the bass line on that is just dreamy. Regatta de Blanc, the title track, It's Alright For You, the energy's great. It's kind of punkish, but when hearing Police do punk works for me as opposed to other bands doing punk who are punk bands. Bring On the Night, is another one. On Any Other Day, I think that's Stuart Copeland who does the lead vocals on that. But yeah, Regatta de Blanc's. I mean, all the Police records are good. I face the fact that every Police album, there's more good music than not good music. But yeah, I mean, great record from the Police. Number 4. Number 3, and I could have split hairs. I could have put that number 3, but UK's Danger Money. This is I like the debut somewhat. Again, Alan Holdsworth, I think, is part of the guilty party that affects it. But Eddie Jobson stands out as much, if not more, on this. Of course, you have Terry Bozzio replacing Bill Bruford, which might be better. But the songwriting is really good on this. I was saying that Kevin Gilbert sang UK track on the last video with the self-titled debut. It's actually Rendezvous 602. He starts doing his John Wetton impersonation. It's funny, but Danger Money, this is great. I mean, it's prog. It sounds a lot, I said this the other record, the debut album, it sounds a lot like ELP. It's almost like if John Wetton joined ELP in some ways. But the songs don't go on too long. Carrying No Cross is a 12-minute epic. It's a little long, but I think it works for the most part. And there weren't too many epic tracks released in 1979. You had Rush did Hemispheres the year before, and the year after you had, Natural Science and some other bands doing some epics. But Yes Head, was it Machine Messiah? I'm not sure. But it's like, that might be one of the only epics that I think of for 1979. But Caesar's Palace Blues, Nothing to Lose. I mean, it's not perfect. Because I remember when I got into UK, I was checking them out. I thought, they're kind of like Crimson, because of course that's John Wetton, and Bill Bruford was on the first album. And I kind of thought, the first album was okay, but I thought it was going to be better than it was. And I checked out Danger Money, and I thought, this is better. But then I felt like it's still not like definitively better. having listened to them again the last few weeks, again, I would say that while this isn't a perfect record, this is definitively a better record to me than the debut album. Some people would disagree with that, but I think it's more polished. I think Eddie Jobson's even better on this than he was on the first album, which I really liked his work on the first album. So, number 3. Number 2, I don't have a physical copy of course, Supertramp's Breakfast in America. And while I don't think this is my favorite Supertramp album, it probably has my favorite Supertramp song, or at least my top 3 in Logical Song, as much as that's a pop banger and it's been played frequently. It holds up. I mean, it's like Stairway to Heaven. I get goosebumps every time I hear it. I don't know if I ever get sick of it. And it was kind of their peak in some ways, but it has also Goodbye Stranger, the title track, and Take the Long Way Home, which are classic rock staples. And I get really nostalgic hearing them. I mean, you know, I've been going through some stuff recently, and it's just like, this is perfect music to listen to. Child Division, which is a 7.5-minute epic, is nice. Gone Hollywood, the first track. I mean, it's a pretty damn good record. It's number 2 for that reason. But I guess I don't find it to be as good as some other, like, I wouldn't put it above Crime of the Century. I wouldn't put it above even This Quietest Moments. But it's probably in the top 4. And again, it's their peak as a pop band, and it's their best pop songs. So I guess that's the best way to put it. It's Supertramp doing their best pop music, and it turned out really well. So at number 1, well, this was their last proper album, In Through the Outdoor from Led Zeppelin. I have the cassette tape, which has the brown cover and the bag and stuff. I know that John Paul Jones was sort of running the band, and the writing was kind of on the wall about everything. You know, they just, you know, they were adapting. They weren't doing the blues rock exactly for most of this, but it's got almost, they're most influenced by prog in terms of like the keyboard arrangements and stuff, because this is the most keyboard driven Zeppelin album. You know, Carousel Alhambra is a prog. It's prog. You know, they did better prog pieces like In the Light and Achilles' Last Stand, but it's their most keyboard driven prog piece. I'm Gonna Crawl, I love. Of course, the songs that got on the radio, like In the Evening, it's a nice riff. Fool in the Rain was a ballad. I like the guitar solo in that. Even though it's kind of slow and it's repetitive a little bit. And All My Love has that synthesizer solo that I used to think sounds like a trumpet. And Southbound Suarez is another one. I mean, this Hot Dog, I'm a Zeppelin fanboy. Their first favorite band, really, in the early 90s. And while I'm ranking their albums, this is not at the top, but it definitely isn't at the bottom. It's probably the most different Zeppelin album, so some people don't look at it as much, although Present, you could say, was pretty different too. As a swan song, I think it's, and their label is Swan Song, as a last sort of proper record, it's still a good way to go out. It's album of the year in 1979 largely because of the sort of, I haven't found like that definitive, addictive favorite record from 79, but this is the closest thing to it. So that's my 1979 list. 1980 will be coming hopefully sooner than later. I can at least say as much it's a deeper year. 1980, there's a lot of albums, and I may have to just sort of not include them because there's a lot of stuff that I have just doing some research came out in 1980 that I don't, including, you know, I'm going to have to find room for talking heads in here. But yeah. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, give it a like, ring the notification bell, because it helps with YouTube's algorithm, and we'll see you next time.